Angela Reed, and welcome to 100 Ways to Filipino, a storytelling project and a time capsule, but mostly a love letter to the Filipino-American diaspora. We're all navigating what it means to be Filipino in places far from the motherland. So 100 Ways is for the folks living in between, not feeling Filipino or American. 100 Ways is for the folks trying to bridge the chasm of our culture with a hyphen. And 100 Ways is for the folks searching for the stories we were never told or taught at home or at school, because there's no single way to Filipino. Today, I'm so excited to be joined by Kevin Powell. Kevin has a passion for style. He's worked for over a decade in fashion, first in retail and then in wholesale. And today he's using his creativity to help brands grow in e-commerce channels. So, Kevin, this is take two.
Hello. So happy to be
How are
here.
you? Oh my God. Okay, so silly story. Kevin and I actually sat and had this chat about a week or two ago. I always intended for 100 Ways to Filipino to be more of a written, like mid-form content, kind of back and forth, where I ask you a question and people could read it. And I did the first few like that. And then I had a conversation with Lottie where I'm listening to this and I'm like, well, shoot, this really should be a podcast plus, written. So I guess you learn as you go. And so Kevin's been super patient and he's agreed to subject himself to this a second time so we can
Not
actually have
subject.
a real conversation that people can hear.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me once again. Honestly, it's just nice to reconnect with you. You're such a good vibe, and I feel you have a good energy.
Well,
So
thank
I'm
you.
happy to have a second convo with you. Hello.
Well, I'm glad that you're here. Over the course of working at Dear Floor, you
Yeah.
end up meeting a lot of people. You meet them at events, but more often than not, you're meeting them online. And I tell people Instagram and the DMs is almost like my office, like my physical office space,
Mm,
because I no longer work in a physical office. I can work from anywhere. But the things that you typically miss in corporate environment is, the water cooler chats, swinging by
mm,
somebody's desk to like just bullshit a little bit, or grabbing lunch with someone in between, because it's what makes work. I think you need that kind of element in your work to make it just a little more valuable for you.
mm.
Um, but Kevin, you were like one of those people who just kind of reached out pretty immediately because you had tried our gummies and you were so sweet and so kind. And something that I've always loved about you is that on our posts, there's always a comment. Like I remember with Lottie's, you're like, what song is this? And now you're listening to Lottie like
Mm.
nonstop. Um, when we did the whole thing with the LA fires, you were there. I mean, it was nice, like seeing that somebody had actually seen our post, because in the world of social, you don't always know who's
Mm.
seeing it or if anybody's like seeing it, and so you've always kind of been that kind face out in the crowd, and so it's like nice knowing that people like you are out there when we do this. So I'm happy to sit here again with you, Kevin.
Thanks for the
So,
shout out. Thanks for the shout
oh
out.
my God, please. Okay, so you're thanking me now. Let's start asking some questions.
Come on with it.
Oh my God. All right. So, Kevin, obviously we've had a conversation before,
Mm.
but I would love for people to know just a little bit about you and where you came from. Would you mind telling us your origin story?
Totally. Long form. So I was born in Silver Spring, Maryland, Montgomery County, Maryland, in the early 90s. I was my mom's second child and my dad's third. He had my stepsister in a prior relationship. Um, and all throughout life, I was told that my sister, who's 4 years older than me, I was told that my sister actually named me either after a boy she liked in kindergarten or something, or after the main character in Home Alone. Which I think is endearing, but also a little cringy. I don't know, because I don't know. It was such a cutesy kind of movie, so I almost felt like that dichotomy. But my name is my name, Kevin Powell. It is what it is. And anyway, so I then grew up in PG County, which I'm proudly from PG County. I think a lot of folks who come from PG County say that they're proud from being
So,
from
what's
that
for the
county.
folks that don't know what PG County is? What's PG
Mm.
County?
So it's a predominantly black, or I don't quote me, but I've always believed it to be a predominantly black county in Maryland. It's some consider it a suburb of DC. My house was, I lived in Hydesville, so we were like a 5 minute, maybe less drive to the DC Maryland state line. So it was in the DMV, DC metropolitan area.
Okay, so something that I'd wondered when I first, started interacting with you on Instagram,
Mm,
I knew you were Filipino, but your name is Kevin Powell,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So talk to me a little bit more about your background, Kevin.
Yes, very important. So I'm a mixed kid. I'm half Filipino, half Bicolano, and half African American. My dad was black, and my mom is Bicolano Filipino.
Right. And so growing up in PG County, right,
Mm,
which is, you know, it is a predominantly black county.
yeah.
Um, when you think about influences on your identity, how much of it do you feel was shaped by your father's family, your proximity to black culture in the county that you grew up in, and
Hmm.
then your mother's Bicolano identity?
Well, growing up in a predominantly black county, I obviously went to schools that were, for the most part, predominantly black. So I got a lot of education in culture there, but mostly I got my education in black culture from my sister, who's 4 years older than her. Today is actually her birthday.
Oh,
Happy
wow, happy
birthday, Crystal
birthday.
Powell. So yeah, I always because she was always in charge. She was the eldest. She was always in charge of the radio. I would hear TLC. I would see Vibe on her walls, like Vibe covers, Essence covers, all that. So I had a good education in Black culture from those two entities, I guess. And then my mom was really responsible, which is quite often quite common. My mom was really responsible for giving me a Filipino education and really keeping me around the Filipinos in my family, my cousins, my titas and Lola, who she personally, for the most part, sponsored to come over here to the States from the Philippines. She kept me and my sister really, really active in Filipino groups, one of which was called the Bicol Youth. We would dance traditional dances like tinikling, pandago sa ilaw, and we would meet every Sunday with other youth in the community and just plan choreographed dances and just like
Mhm.
community service projects.
So what kind of stuff would you dance to?
You love this. So we dance again. We did some traditional dances. We did
Mhm.
some traditional dances, and then we did some because Filipinos are super playful. So we also threw in some hip hop choreographies, like to songs like Prince's "I Think When Doves Cry," and then for
Mhm.
some god awful reason, well, some blessed reason, I should rather say, we also did some choreography to what is it, Genuine's "Pony," which I don't know what kind of business we had as like teens and tweens dancing to that in front of like Artitas and Lolas. But it was a bit of like tongue in cheek. Like we're playful. We're playful
Mhm.
people. So we
I can
did
only
we did all
imagine
that,
all
yeah.
of the titas who had seen Magic Mike when that came on. They must have
Oh,
been like either like
stupid.
cheering, but also like actually they were probably more like cheering than mortified. Like, I know this song.
Trauma. Trauma.
Oh my god, that's hilarious. You know, at any point, because something that often happens with kids that are mixed in our community, right?
Mm,
Filipinos are always the first to embrace folks, but sometimes like we will have members of our family who are both low key and high key racist.
mm,
And I
mm.
think that is true just across the board. I guess, were there any moments with either side of the family where you felt like you were other? So, like maybe not Filipino enough in that moment, or perhaps not black enough in the other moment?
I think that's a really excellent question. I wish I could answer it better. And I say that to say this. I wish I could answer it better because there were certain things that kept me from knowing the true answer. One main thing was I didn't grow up knowing Tagalog, unfortunately. My mom was working multiple jobs, so she didn't have the time to teach my sister and I the language. And that's just, it's not uncommon for first or
It's not
second gen.
uncommon.
I keep on forgetting which I am, first or second gen immigrants, to be made to seem American by their parent who
Sure.
immigrated, so that was one factor. And I think, secondly, growing up always kind of removed myself from a lot of interaction with people, just because I did grow up gay in the late, early, like mid to in the 90s in general. Um, and at that time, it was still a question of, is it okay to be gay? At least, and especially within a child. I didn't know, I didn't have any influences. So, because of that, I always kind of kept myself away from people because I didn't want to be
Mm,
found out. I didn't want to
right,
be
right.
called out. So, but yeah, I mean, in retrospect, hearing some conversations as an adult between my titas, my mom, there was some shadiness in terms of a Filipino tita's perception of, for example, how much my African American father worked, or
Mhm.
like that it also comes into that capitalistic, like, if you're not doing as much as I think you should, you're not doing shit.
Right.
So there was some of that. There was some of that that I sensed in the end.
I know. It's kind of it's a little wild. I mean, a lot of it's cultural, and it's not an excuse by any stretch of the imagination,
Hmm.
right? But even your most well-intentioned titas, sometimes they just slide into behaviors that are microaggressive without
Yeah.
even knowing it. And so it's something that I wonder because, my husband is also half, right? But he's half Filipino, half white. He has other challenges where people don't, and it's really fascinating. It didn't occur to us until fairly recently, but like when he meets people from the Philippines,
Hmm.
like, I see you, I know you're Filipino, right? I can guess that you're mixed, Filipino something, but I look at you and I know that you're Filipino. I've known my husband since I was 18. I looked
Hmm.
at him and I knew that he was definitely part Filipino, but I could see the Filipino. It is the wildest thing. We just realized that when he meets Filipinos from the Philippines, they don't see it. He encounters just utter disbelief where they're like, "You're not
Yeah.
Filipino." And he's like, "I am Filipino. My mother's Filipino. My grandparents are Filipino." And
Yeah.
it's almost like they're like, "Why would you lie about being Filipino?" And so it's a
Yeah.
different kind of challenge, right? So,
I To go off of that, I think it really reminds me of when I went to Ghana
mm,
um, a couple of years ago, and I was in the car with a friend who invited me, who I was staying with. We were driving around, we were getting gas, and there was a man who was trying to approach the car. Nothing dangerous or
yeah.
anything. They were just trying to converse or whatever. Um, I think they were also trying to, ask for money, which we
Hmm.
eventually gave them, but that's neither here nor there. Anyway, she made note to me that he was being so persistent because he thought me and an Afro Latina woman who was with us were white. And we're clearly not like white. We're mocha.
Hmm.
We're like people of color.
Yeah,
But I think, to your point, I also feel like it might be something about, representation matters. If you don't see a lot of mixed people around you, you can't really clock it as strongly as knowing they're within a certain community also.
for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And I think we as like American born Filipinos sometimes have certain assumptions,
Mm,
right? Because of various beauty ideals that we heard about, like from our parents. It's like, oh, the
yeah.
mestizo look. And then, like, you've got someone
Mm,
who's like mestizo, like looking at you in the face and you don't even recognize, them as one
yeah.
of you. It's weird and it's fascinating. Um, Coming back to something you were saying earlier, because you mentioned that you spent a lot of time kind of keeping yourself away from others because you
Hmm.
were scared of being found out, right?
Yeah.
You were scared that people were going to find out or discover that you were gay before you were ready to tell people. I
Mm.
guess one question I have for you is how did you know? How did you know you were ready? And when was that moment?
How did I know when I was ready? Well, well, also I want to backtrack. I want to
Sure.
rephrase. I want to make a distinction. So I said that I didn't want people to discover that I was gay.
Mhm.
I feel like it was pretty obvious for this flamboyant, effeminate kid growing up. So to correct myself, I just didn't want anyone to say anything about it or say
Uh-huh.
anything to me to have to confront it in the moment. Um, but coming back to the question, I knew that I was different in like fifth or sixth grade. I didn't, yeah, I definitely knew that I was different in my mannerisms and what I was being told about my mannerisms, um, from family, from friends, from people in general. I think the first person I came out to was like a female best friend of mine in seventh or eighth grade, middle school. And I did so because I felt we had created a safe space around our bond,
Mhm.
um, around watching Will and Grace at the time. You know, it was an NBC show. It was shown to everyone, and it wasn't. It was really significant because it wasn't a hyper flamboyant, stereotypical gay person being presented. It was just like a gay lawyer, just a
Mhm.
regular seeming dude. You wouldn't be able to immediately, at least, clock his gayness. And of course, his the archetype. Jack McFarlane, the
Yeah.
more flamboyant character, to be playful and all that stuff. So my friends and I at the time bonded over that, and I created a safe space for me to tell her. And then I think second person I told was my sister. And I think the reason why I felt emboldened to speak up finally is I think just two reasons. I don't know if I can explain it. But one of the reasons was I feel like I'm just a person to want to rip the band aid off. I think that might be, I'm a Sagittarius. So what that means to me is I'm honest, I'm trustworthy, and I just want to like be honest and get it out. I
Mhm.
think a second part to me feeling comfortable, or not comfortable, but being open to coming out is it would have just been so much harder to stay in the closet and keep a secret. So much more energy. It takes so much energy to keep a secret within yourself, whatever it is.
Yeah.
um yeah, so I just had to let it out.
When is your birthday?
December 10th.
December 10th. So you're
Mm.
Sagittarius, I'm a Leo. This is why we get along.
Okay,
So
hello.
So, you know, so okay, you said your sister was listening to TLC. She had all of her
Yeah.
like covers up and posters up on her wall. Like, who were your icons growing up?
Okay, my icons were always female artists, and
Mhm.
I think they still to this day are. Um, my icons growing up were Mariah Carey, definitely, Britney Spears, but I kept the Britney Spears, um, my Britney Spears fondness to myself because it was hyper feminine, and
Yeah.
I didn't want to,
But now which
So,
Britney? Which Britney era
which
was iconic
Britney?
for you?
I mean, the original, Hit Me One More Time,
Okay,
definitely.
was it like
Yeah,
I was wondering because it's always that or like Britney with a snake, right? I'm a slave for you, Britney.
yeah.
So
I was
it's
still with her there, but not as much.
not as
Yeah.
much. You like the sweet, innocent, like Britney, but it wasn't
Yeah,
that
yeah,
sweet
yeah,
or
yeah,
innocent. But
yeah. But I think a reason why I did, maybe I don't know, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but maybe a reason why I wasn't really into I'm a slave for you Britney is because it was really sexualized.
mm,
And at the time I was just recently out. So I wanted to be out, but I didn't want to be known as the gay kid in school.
right.
So I don't know, maybe it was just something psychologic, you know, me trying to stay away from certain things, or me just trying to pivot my focus into different artistic whatevers.
Were there, I guess, in your school, were there any other Filipino kids in your high school, or was it just you and your sister?
I'm gonna say no. I'm gonna say no. Um, yeah, no. It was
Were
it was
there
yeah.
Were there any other gay kids in your school?
There was probably just in middle school. No, no.
But what about high
Um,
school?
in high school, there was probably okay. There was. I mean, thankfully, there was an LGBTQ plus youth group,
Hmm.
extracurricular. So there was that group, but they seemed to be misfits, and I didn't want to involve myself in that kind of group just because I wanted to stay in the more academic, musical, extracurricular kind of spaces. So there wasn't a lot of overlap. Yeah.
It's interesting. And I think what you're saying makes sense, right? Because you had your community.
Yeah.
Why would you leave your academic peers or your musical peers or, whatever? Yeah, why would you leave the places and spaces where you were already starting to thrive because of one aspect? Like,
Hmm.
which,
Well, and to phrase it to phrase it better, I think that the LGBTQ kind of group in high school had different interests than me as well.
Mhm.
They were into more anime and comic books, whereas I was into like mainstream pop and I don't know, Death Cab for Cutie, like the
Yeah,
Killers, Green Day. So there's also we couldn't really talk about a lot other than being gay, and that's kind of a drag. If it's
right.
just talking about being gay when you're so new in the community.
Well, that's kind of like being friends with someone only because you're both Filipino, right? If that's the only
Yeah,
piece that we have in common, like, we're not probably going to have a very deep friendship,
yeah,
right? Or have anything
yeah.
else to do other than talk about Filipino-ness, which is okay. We could do that. We're doing that right now, but
It's dope, but it can be limited when
it
there's
is
no
limiting,
like other like intersections.
right? And you're also talking about things that people have an affinity for. If you're not going to geek out on like Sailor Moon, like, it's just not going to freaking
Oh,
happen.
yes.
So- okay, so coming back to the icons question. So
Mm.
if Britney and Mariah were kind of your icons growing up, who are your icons today?
Oh goodness. Um, Michaela Cole.
Hmm.
Michaela Cole. So she's an actress, director, producer out of the UK. I believe she's Ghanaian via the UK. She had a couple of series. One was Chewing Gum, um, which I think came out first on Netflix, and then the second, which was really really widely received and critically acclaimed, was I May Destroy You.
Mm.
And I think why she's a current icon of mine was something that she said that I clocked during some of the interviews that I watched of her. And she really pushed the idea of transparency within the industry. And I think that was such a powerful kind of statement. And it really speaks to me. I mean, going back to what I said before, me being a Sag, just wanting to rip the band-aid off, just wanting to be transparent and not like I don't like when people infer things or hint at things rather. I don't like it when folks try to hint at things. I know that it's a mechanism for some people to communicate in ways that they're more comfortable with, but I think it's just way I'm just very about face
Hmm.
when I'm speaking, or I try to be at least. And then what was more powerful was really powerful to me in her speaking to transparency especially was because she was talking about it within the context of an industry. It's so difficult to feel comfortable enough to be transparent with your fellow coworkers, with your peers about, let's say, salary, let's say, best practices, like what they've experienced from vendors, from accounts, whatever, just because it feels like you should be hush hush and keep things to yourself, even though it's bad behavior that you experience from other accounts or vendors or whatever.
Mm.
Um, and also, I think transparency ultimately helps strengthen community, um, the community that you involve yourself in because you're providing that great information. So I'd say Michaela Cole, and also she's gorgeous. She's dope. She's cool culturally. She's like she's an artist. I think she's been working with Ricardo Tucci.
Hmm.
I'm sure I mispronounced his name because I haven't thought about him for a while. But the previous creative director of Givenchy,
Yep.
she's dope. So I'll say Michaela Cole.
So asked you the question icons because um, you have a very individual sense of style. It's just, and I
Mm.
love it so much. Every now and then you'll pop something, on your Insta. Even, I'm really looking forward to sharing the photos that you gave me,
Oh.
for this post because there's a couple, it's actually not even one, there are a couple that like stick out in my head. There's the black and white one. There is the one with you in the muted tones of like browns and mauves, which also I
Mm.
think is just stunning because like from a color like standpoint, I'm just kind of like, wow, you hit this, you hit this, you hit this, and then
Yeah.
that's mauve. And it's just a beautiful photo. And then there's the other one we had spoken before about how much you love those that contrasting like pattern, right? Where
Yeah.
it's kind of and there's one that you have, and I remember I don't like my memory's telling me that it's bright blue and then something that is a different graphic, more kind of like black and white pattern. Is that right? In the
Yeah.
foreground?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you definitely have a very distinct sense of style that is very much you, right? And it's uniquely you, Kevin. Um, where like how did you find your style? Because I feel like everybody we go through phases and we fumble through it and eventually
Mm.
we come to things that we like. But I think a lot of people, their sense of style, is the style that they carry with them for life. And in some
Mm.
cases, it works out brilliantly. In other cases, you're like, shit, she still looks like she's wearing the same stuff from like 1994, right? So how did you find your style, and how do you find it evolving over time?
Well, first of all, thank you. I appreciate your admiration and you clocking how much love and joy that I put into styling myself. So thank you. I would say my earliest maybe style influence from media would have been Sex in the City.
Mhm.
The styling of Patricia Field, just her way of juxtaposing elements in a look really resonated with me. So growing up in high school, early high school, I would try to mix off the wall things like I don't know a leather silver spiky bracelet from Hot Topic with a striped polo from American Eagle. Don't judge. Those were what I could afford, and those were
Not
like
judging.
it in middle school, high school. So those were the brands, but I really tried to get a sense of how I could mix things and make it look cool and how I could make myself feel comfortable and to make it make sense for me. And then I think that kind of just continued. I kept on being a fan of Sex in the City. I kept on seeing the really incredible styling done on that show. And then when I started working retail in Brooklyn, in New York, when I moved to New York in 2012, I worked at this multi-brand denim shop for denim heads called Brooklyn Denim Co. It's still
Mhm.
going to this day. I actually do a lot of e-commerce work for them. They're really dope, knowledgeable, expert denim salespeople there. So I worked there in retail, and I would see a lot of Asian, particularly Japanese, tourists come through in Comme des Garçons, and that stylistically is the pinnacle, like to me, of fashion and art. Um, so now I think I just have an elevated, super juxtaposed eye for styling, at least myself. Yeah.
It's funny. I feel the same way about Issey Miyake,
Oh, beautiful. Yes.
right? Because it's just like
Yeah.
that structure, but then all of a sudden it bends and it turns into like something else, and you're just kind of like, and in many ways, like it's so forward thinking, but it's also
Mm.
so classic and,
Yeah,
and it's
totally,
like
totally.
it's wild. It's a study in contrast. And so what made you decide? I guess yes, you've had this love of fashion. Like, at what point in your life did you say, "Okay, I'm going to make this into a career"?
I well, I kind of fell into it. So in undergrad, I got my degree in music. I was a violinist for about 13 years, but from that, I wanted to go into arts management, the nonprofit sector. And I had done multiple internships in New York. And then after moving to New York, I found out there was no money in the arts and no money in nonprofit.
Yeah.
Not because it's lesser value, just because it is what it is. Let's be honest, unfortunately, and I couldn't support myself because also being in New York City, it was super competitive.
Hmm.
Even though I had all of this experience, I'd gone to a good school in my mind. Um, so needing to support myself, make ends meet, pay for rent, or at least the futon that I was renting, um, in a friend's apartment. I started in retail. Well, actually, no, that's a lie. I started this job that I found on Craigslist. I was just doing shipping.
Hmm.
I was really quick. I'm very able bodied. I'm very quick and hardworking. And I want to just like, sometimes I could just kind of compete with myself in trying to complete tasks.
Hmm.
So I was really good at that. And open a sales position, a retail sales position opened up and with this startup called Classic Specs. And the sales position was in the shop and shop within Brooklyn Denim Company. So it was just this little, like, really nicely built, beautiful wooden kiosk. I was hawking glasses. Um, my manager, who and the CEO of the company at the time of Classic Specs at the time even asked me, I think I remember, like, are you sure you want to go into a sales role? Because I do not seem like when it's just default Kevin, I do not seem like an extrovert. I do not seem like I want to chat your ear off or talk to you about all the things. But once I got into the shop and shop and started talking to people, like my work ethic kicked in, and I started to understand and realize what I needed to do to make a sale or to
Hmm.
engage with customers. So I started to create the sales persona, and that it I was very good at sales, especially when you can learn how to just shoot the shit with someone. Being in New York, that's really, really important. Being in New York as a salesperson, being able to just shoot the shit is really important, I feel. And knowing when to stop
Hmm.
and like keep your distance, just reading energy. Um, so I kind of just kept going, moving from retail space to retail space. I was selling, prescription glasses. I was selling French women's wear clothes, high end denim. Um, and this is like denim head denim. It's not just like off the shelf, like
You're
off the
talking
rack
like raw
Levi's. It's like,
Japanese selvage, like
yes,
put it in your
yes.
freezer, never wash it denim. Yes.
Yeah. Salvage all day. That's all you care about. So I got a really good education there. And then I think because I loved fashion or had a passion for fashion, cringe, I just decided to continue. And I knew that I wanted to move into wholesale simply because I wanted my weekends
Hmm.
and I wanted a bit more distance between me and customers. So with retail, you have to either build up a client list, a clientele of regular customers that you always speak to, and or speak to customers from off the sidewalk who come into the store as traffic. With wholesale, you were ideally in a more professional, closed off, exclusive kind of environment. There were wholesale buyers, like buyers for Bergdorf Goodman, buyers for Saks, Neiman Marcus, Shop Up, whatever. But they wouldn't be able to just walk into your showroom. They would have to make an appointment, albeit during really busy market seasons, like September and February, super duper busy, high intensity, but still it would be structured. It would be a super professional environment, and that really spoke to me. And if I'm being honest, there was a bit more prestige.
Mhm.
Um, in being able to say, yeah, I helped get this brand into BG. I helped get this brand into Net-a-Porter or I don't know, Essence, whatever. Um, and so I continued into wholesale for about 8 to 10 years. I worked for in corporate spaces for Le Sportsac, really dope nylon brands, been around since the 70s.
Mhm.
I've worked for Levi's corporate, selling women's and plus denim to Belk department stores. But I've also worked with multiple multi-brand showrooms that were more independent. Um, and I feel like I really decided to leave wholesale just because, again, I had kind of like history repeats itself. I reached a breaking point where I really just wanted to get more distance
Yeah.
between me and customers.
Yeah.
And if I'm being honest, going back to early Kevin, finding out that I finding out that I needed to create a persona for me to succeed, and dealing with certain cultures of people, like frog, um, it really kind of fucked with my head. Like, who
Hmm.
is this identity that I've created? It really doesn't speak to. It feels like an almost bastardized identity, like not authentic to me. I could have stuck it out. I could have stayed in wholesale, but after so many years, I really just needed to get away from it. Yeah, so I feel like now I'm moving into e-commerce, and I do have that distance, yet I'm still able to keep that creative element going.
No, for sure. Because it's fascinating. You have the ability to sell on the one-to-one, right?
Mm,
But then the other piece of selling really is in the merchandising and how you present the product and
mm,
like how you do it artfully. And I do love that you bring a lot of your own design sensibility to, making the clothes just look good. Like
mm.
even I peeped your grailed. Like I peeped your
Ah,
things.
thank
I know what
you.
you got there. So and because like as part of this whole process, if you are online, in spaces and places, I will look at it. If there's a podcast, I'll listen to it just in preparation for this.
Mm,
And so, it actually doesn't surprise me, that you as an introvert were able to find the persona and find the things that you need to do because I think, this is something that it's you can call it ambition. Your professional
mm,
desire takes over and you kind of do what you need to do. I mean, extroverts actually do the same thing too. The only difference is how we feed off the energy. For extroverts, they're energized by it. I have the feeling that you went home at the end of every day and you were just kind of like, oh, exhausted, like you needed to like
yes.
peel yourself off the couch because it was just exhausting. I'm actually an ambivert, right? So I definitely
Mm,
present very well as an extrovert,
mm,
but I need like 30 minutes to decompress after an intense day. If I were doing
mm,
sales demos for like 3 to 4 days, 3 to 4, not 3 to 4 days, 3 to 4 hours where I'm
mm.
like talking about your floor, selling the product, trying to explain why you should get this. You should try this. After 4 hours of that, and I've done back to backs where you go from one demo to like the other,
Oof,
I need like a big cocktail, you
yeah.
know, and just to like decompress so we can do it again. And if I have 3 to 4 successive days of that, then it's like I am not a happy person at all because then I
Mm,
am just completely sapped. So yeah, I am definitely an extrovert who needs like time to recharge batteries if I'm going to do this over and over again. But coming back to your notion of personas, I feel like this is something that we all do at
mm,
different points in time, right?
mhm,
When we're passing through the different spaces where, if I'm with Filipinos, my son, especially if I'm with Filipinos from the Philippines, my son will say to me, he's like, your accent and the way you spoke changed completely in
mm,
that like 5-minute conversation. If I'm in West Virginia visiting, my mother, and I'm seeing, if I'm at the local store, I do know that like my demeanor and probably the way I speak changes based in that environment. When I'm speaking at the consulate, my husband says, you've got the voice on, right? And
Mm,
it's the voice that I use for business. It's the voice that I use when I'm um, talking about the company or presenting the company in some way, not in the sales space, but like, this is, what we do, like when we're presenting, just presenting our company to like other spaces and places. So
mm.
it's funny. I don't know that I've ever felt caught between the two. I wonder sometimes if I just walk through it and then am I just not thinking about it and doing it subconsciously? I don't know. It's funny. Um,
Yeah, code switching, I think if I can phrase it like that,
yeah.
code
Yeah,
switching
yeah.
is, in the black community at least, it's a really controversial, I'll say, subject.
Mhm.
On one side, it's essentially trying to be a chameleon, like just being agile in moving in different spaces just so you can get yours and be successful. On the other side, which I think is, I personally feel it's a little reductive, is it puts folks who code switch, and I'm not, that's the Martin Luther Kevin. I don't know. I'm not an anthropologist or anything. I'm just
Martin
saying
Luther
from
King.
my
I love
personal
it.
opinion
Uh-huh.
experience. On the other side of it, I think, which can be reductive, it's that idea of, well, why aren't you being yourself? You are yourself. Why are you changing yourself to make other people more comfortable? Which I understand that we're, but a person is not a monolith. Like there are
Mhm.
many facets of people, and I think that switching up a way of phrasing things might also help build community. Um, when you're in those spaces. So I personally think it's a great thing.
I totally agree with you. When I was working with people from other countries, right? I had to change the way I spoke because you couldn't use American slang because they wouldn't know
Mm,
what you're talking about. You couldn't
hmm.
speak as quickly because, again, you're talking to people from Asia, Latin America, Europe, for
Yeah.
whom English is not their primary language. And
Mm,
in the same regard, I would get thrown into rooms where I would be the only person not speaking French, and I'd be the one expected to know what the follow ups were coming out of that meeting. And so, you know how I
mm,
adapted to that scenario? Like, because I actually did actually have pretty good, I was proficient enough, better at understanding and hearing, right? And versus like speaking.
mm,
Um, what I did in that instance was okay, since I'm responsible for knowing what happens next in this meeting, and all you guys were just speaking French for like the last 59 minutes of this 1 hour call,
mm,
I would do the recap in English. And I said, I want to make sure I got this. We are going to be doing this. We're going to be shooting this tomorrow. We've
yeah.
agreed that we will not do X version. There is a legal issue if we say this in Germany, so
Hmm.
we will not do this. And I would also honestly like rate myself. Did I get a 9 out of 10 on this one in terms of comprehension? Right? Or was it like a 2 out of 10? And some days you had the 2 days and other days you had the nine because again, I can understand French from like high school classes, right?
Yeah.
And like movies, but like business speak and trying to learn the language. I mean, learning the language of business in English is hard enough, right? So, anyway, I guess last question before we go into the speed round. I guess
Ooh.
knowing so kind of I want to pull these threads together because I love all of the different aspects of where our conversation has gone today. But if we come back to the question of identity, so
Mm,
Kevin, you're Filipino, you're black, you're gay, you have a
mm,
crazy sense of style, right? And you carry that into, you carry that passion into the work that you do and your design sensibility that you bring to the work that
mm.
you're doing. I guess if somebody were to ask you, Kevin, you take all of that, who are you? How would you describe? who you are?
There are two ways I can answer this. So Kevin, the person, is introverted, but I'm not simply introverted. I've also trained myself to be extroverted. So I'm flexible. Um, I'm a human. So I definitely have an inner saboteur, just like anyone else, overthinking a lot of things, trying to quiet that inner saboteur down. Um, I'm a Sagittarius, which to me is not all encompassing of my personality, but for me, it means that I'm honest. I'm very trustworthy. I like to rip the band aid off of my truth just to be transparent. I'm multifaceted. I feel very complex given my cultural identities that you just mentioned. Um, I have a really, really strong work ethic that I get from my parents, particularly my mom, who was the eldest of 11 children, parentified, brought several of her cousins and siblings over from the Philippines, um, constantly worked multiple jobs for my sister and I. And Kevin is a professional. I mean, you've mentioned it. I'm an individual who has been in the fashion industry for 10 plus years, previously working in retail, mostly wholesale, working with really dope brands. Iceberg Levi's, Studio 189, which was a CFD Vogue Fashion Fund brand, co founded by Rosario Dawson. And now I'm working with more in an e com space, and just building out my hobby of being a reseller on Grailed.
Actually, I'm going to ask you a second question before we go to the speed
Mm,
round. How do you see yourself evolving 5 years from now, 10 years from now? What would you like to see for yourself?
yeah. I know that I would like to continue to be a grounded, empathetic person at heart. And I think that I've always had that within me. I always, almost to a detriment, always look at the other side of a coin. I always try to play devil's advocate with myself when I'm thinking about certain social situations or business situations. So I want to be open to people, and cultures and experiences. I think that's really just the essence of what I'm hoping for myself, and to really be open to building more community, because I think that as one gets older, if one's lucky, one is able to actively and intentionally distance themselves away from habits that they grew up with. Mine, which we touched upon, growing up was like staying away from people, um, to not be found out about certain things that I was insecure about, certain parts that I was insecure about myself. But I think in the next chapter of my life, I really want to be open to more people personally, not just in the context of my Sasha Fierce alternative personality, Kevin, but like just really wear my heart on my sleeve when I'm conversing with people. Yeah, that's my hope for myself.
Okay. All right. Speed round.
Mm,
What is one thing about you no one expects that cannot be found online?
I love this. So growing up, we was Poe, so I would watch PBS on Saturdays and then watch MTV, or not MTV, Mad TV, but PBS. They would always show Celtic river dancers. So at a very early age, I really did want to be either a river dancer or Michelle Kwan. Like I wanted like either of
That's a
those.
lot of jumping. One does
Yeah.
kicks, the other does flips. That's amazing. No, wait. Michelle Kwan, am I screwing up? She's an ice skater.
Ice skater.
I
I
was thinking
also
she was a
wanted to be ice skater. Yeah.
okay, so ice skater. Sorry, why did I think she was a gymnast? Ice skater. So, okay, I can see that. Like she dances on ice. Okay, that's
Yeah.
cool. That's cool. All right. You have been asked to speak at some big event, right?
Mhm.
What is your hype song? Like, what are you walking out to, Kevin?
Not thinking about the context, business or
Doesn't
personal,
matter.
I would say Applause by Lady Gaga. It just
Okay.
makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a fun one. Okay, this is always a fun one.
Mm.
They're making a movie about your life. Who's playing you?
This is not a quick round. Oh my gosh, this is going to take me a minute.
It's okay.
It's tough because I don't know a lot of biracial actors. Maybe I'll say the hot dude, or one of the hot dudes from Insecure. I don't know his name. Let me look up his name.
Okay.
But he's an activist. He's light skinned, skinny. He was. I'm gonna look this up. I'm gonna look this up. Insecure. There are better choices, I'm sure, but I'm just gonna say Kendrick Sampson.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Last question, Kevin.
Okay.
How do you Filipino?
How do I Filipino? I work hard and I work to stay as connected in the most authentic way with Filipino culture and Filipino people.
Okay. All right. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for joining us for 100 Ways to Filipino. It's always fun hanging out with you. We have to do this in real life. You're only like way the fuck uptown. Like we could do this in real life one day and just like grab a cocktail or coffee.
I'm down.
Okay, let's do this. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you so much again to Kevin. It was a joy. You got to check his pictures out. If you're just listening to this podcast, please, please, please go to the Substack. You have to see his photographs. They're just stunning. All right. So have a great day, everyone. Thank you so much. Thanks for listening to 100 Ways to Filipino. If this conversation moved you, share it with a friend or maybe that cousin who just discovered they make really good lumpia. You can find all of our podcasts on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're not already following us, find us at Love Dear Floor on Instagram and TikTok or visit us at dearfloor.com. This podcast is brought to you by Dear Floor, our Filipino-founded gummy company sharing culture through flavor and now through stories. See you next time, because there's no single way to Filipino.